I'm Marin, and this is Post-its and Pens. Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Marin, and here you will find a little beauty, a little books, and a little teaching content. So if that sounds like something you might enjoy, I would love for you to subscribe and stick around and join me in my little corner of YouTube. Today's video is going to be my May reading recap, where I go over all of the books that I read during the month and give you my final thoughts and ratings. So let's go ahead and get into the video. So in May, I participated in 2 readathons. The first was a 2-week readathon for the Final Book support group, and then I also did Becca's 48-hour bookoplathon. I will link the vlogs that I did for each of those down below in the description box if you would like to check them out. But this helped me do much more reading than I'd managed in the month of April. I think in April I read 5 books, 4 books, 5 books, something like that. It was not a good reading month. This month was much better. So I'm going to go ahead and run through these in order of my least favorite to my favorite, and we're just gonna roll on into it. So here we go. So my least favorite book of the month was actually a carryover from April. This book took me forever to read, and that was Eon by Allison Goodman. Now, I knew going into this that this was going to cause me some issues because this is a fantasy book, like a high epic fantasy book. That's not usually my preferred genre, and it's long. It's long. It's over 500 pages. So I knew going into this that it was going to be a struggle. However, I did not anticipate how much of a struggle it was going to be. So just to give a quick synopsis, this book follows Eon, whose name is actually Iona, because she is pretending to be a boy in order to practice dragon magic. She wants to become a dragon eye apprentice, wherein she can learn how to channel the magic of the elemental dragons. And when she goes to attempt to be the apprentice for the rat dragon, she awakens or brings back the mirror dragon, who was thought to be gone because no one had seen the mirror dragon in 200 years or something like that. And it kicks off some political intrigue and a fight for the throne of the emperor, etc., etc. So it wasn't the setup of this that I didn't like. It was the main character, who I felt like was ridiculously stupid at times. The choices that she makes throughout the book were very frustrating. There were some things that she was just being really dumb about. Now, I loved the supporting cast of characters in this. We have a trans character who is trying to help Iona through this whole thing, help her navigate the political arena that she's found herself in. I really enjoyed her. There is the guard that is kind of in love with the trans character. Lady Della is her name, and I enjoyed him. That's about it though. Iona herself, or Eon as she's known in the book for the majority of the story, just was not my favorite, y'all, and as such this was a slog. So in the end I gave this 2.5 stars. I am going to read the second and final book in the duology, but I'm going to temper my expectations because this was just not a favorite. And I'd really wanted to enjoy it because so many other people love it. But it was just not a book for me. But I am going to give the sequel a go. So we'll see how that works out. I don't know when I'll get to that, but this one's finally done, even though it took me over a month to finish. All right, coming in at number 9 is The Secret of Shadow Ranch, which is the 5th Nancy Drew book. These are kind of a fun trip back in time, to my childhood. They have a nostalgia factor that I appreciate, but this book had some problematic content, which you kind of expect knowing that these were written in the 1930s. There are a lot of uses of the word Indian. There was some cultural appropriation when Nancy and her friends dressed up in Indian costumes. I'm using the term from the book, Native American clothing, and like went to like a barbecue. There was just some stuff. There was some stuff happening in this book that definitely would put off like modern audiences. I do appreciate that they have not tried to like change the book. I think there were some editions where they kind of tried to go back and like remove some of the problematic elements, and particularly with the first book. You can do a lot of reading on that. I'll link like an article down below if you're interested. But this one had a fun mystery. It was nice to finally be introduced to Bess and George, who are Nancy's best friends, although they come out of nowhere. Like, she's been friends with like another girl in the previous 4 books, and now all of a sudden Bess and George are there and saying that they're her best friends. There's a mention of her boyfriend for the first time, even though, again, the previous 4 books, there's been no mention of a boyfriend. So it's just kind of funny, like, how that works out, because these are set, like, pretty quickly after each other. But yeah, the mystery was pretty good. I liked some of the elements that they used in the plot, some things that kept you on your toes, like some twists and turns in the narrative. But definitely be aware, there's some issues with this book, as you would expect with a book written in 1931. I did give this one 3 stars. So, you know, a fun romp, a nice trip back into my childhood. Just be aware. Be aware. That's all I'll say. Okay, the next book coming in at number 8 is a book that I read on my Kindle as part of the Final Book support group. So again, I talk about this in the vlogs I've linked below, and that is Heart of Glass by Sasha Gould. This is the 2nd book in a duology called Cross My Heart. It's set in Venice. It's about a secret society of women, and we follow our main character, Laura. I can't talk too much about the sequel because I will spoil the first book, but basically Laura has to set out to solve a mystery involving her fiance and the things that happen after that. So that's all I'll say. I liked this one. It had a nice tension in the writing. Like, I was on the edge of my seat, like trying to see what was going to happen next. So I really enjoyed that part. I'm giving it 3.5 stars. I felt like it was a solid ending to the duology, even though it does leave open like the possibility for another book. The author never wrote a 3rd book, but yeah, I enjoyed it. It was a nice, solid ending to a duology, and I'm glad I finally crossed it off my list. It was one of the books on my 22 series to finish in 2022 list, which I'll link up above, so glad to have that one gone. Coming in at number 7 is East by Edith Pattou. This is one that I listened to on audio. This is a retelling of East of the Sun, West of the Moon, which is a Norwegian folktale about a girl who falls in love with a guy who is like changed into a white bear, and what she has to go through to find him. So I really liked this one. I really enjoyed how she set it in Norway. So we have like actual Norwegian characters, their mythology. We have like the setting, which is set in Norway and kind of the surrounding countries. So I really appreciated that. It was very atmospheric, very pretty writing, and the story was very engaging and fun to listen to. I would recommend the audio. It is a full cast, so each character has like their own narrator. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. I'm giving this one 4 stars. It was a really good book, and I'm glad to have finally read it because it's been on my TBR for probably a decade. Coming in at number 6 is The Voyage of the Dawn Treader by C.S. Lewis. This is one of the books in the Chronicles of Narnia series, depending on if you go by publishing order or like when the order was written. They're listing it as book number 5. This is one of my favorites from the series. I would say my favorite is The Magician's Nephew, which is the first book. I also really like The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and I also really like The Silver Chair. So that's kind of an unpopular opinion. A lot of people don't like that one. But yeah, this one was fun. It was fun to reread the story. This is your introduction to Eustace, who is the Pevensy's cousin. The book starts off with a line about Eustace that I always crack up reading. There was a boy called Eustace Clarence Scrubb, and he almost deserved it. So yeah, this was fun. I have the illustrated, like the color illustrated version, which was fun to read and see the colored illustrations. Yeah, the art is Pauline Baines, who like redid a lot of the art like after the books have been published, but very pretty illustrations, and the story was a romping good time, if you will. So there you go. not much to say. I'm giving it 4 stars because I do think it's really fun. And it was a nice way to spend a couple of hours. All right, coming in at number 5, top 5, is The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Bronte. This was a book that I was supposed to also read in April, but as we already discussed, April was not a great reading month, so I did carry this over into May. I did listen to the audio of this. I think it would have been harder for me to get through had I tried to read it in print just because of like the classic language and things like that. This is the first Bronte book I've read. I know that she's only written like a couple, but I really enjoyed this one. It is definitely much more modern feeling. The main character, Helen, leaves her husband, which was not done back then. She takes her son and she runs and she hides. And it basically tells the story of Gilbert, who kind of strikes a fancy to Helen, and it details their relationship, their friendship, and then him finding out the truth about her because he is in love with her. And so she has to explain to him like why they cannot be together. So it was fun. The one thing I thought was a little strange is that this story is told in the form of like one giant letter that Gilbert is writing to a friend. So everything is told like through this letter, which was a little strange. The sections that I liked the most were probably when we get into Helen's diary, because she basically gives Gilbert her diary and is like, here's my history, read it so you'll understand what's going on with me. So I liked those chapters the most, but all in all, I felt like this was a really satisfying read. It was a modern feeling classic, which you can't say very often with the stuff that was written back in the 1800s. So if it sounds at all like up your alley, I say give it a go, because I was surprisingly impressed with this one. I would recommend the audio though, so there you go. Okay, coming in at number 4 is Book of Night by Holly Black. This is another one that I listened to on audio, so I would recommend the audio. This is Holly Black's adult debut. I mentioned in the Book-Oplathon vlog that I did, this feels very much like your typical Holly Black book with some adult elements introduced. So there are some like sex scenes in here, a lot of like fade to black though. So, nothing too over the top. Like the horror elements in this are a little bit more than she would typically do in a YA book. There's some gore, there's some murder, so there's some adult content in here, but it very much felt like a Holly Black book. It was very quick to listen to. It was not a very long audiobook. I enjoyed this, and I'm curious to see what she's gonna do with like for a future adult book. It's been a while since I've read a book by Holly Black, so keep that in mind. The last one that I read, I listened to The Darkest Part of the Forest like 2 or 3 years ago, but this very much feels like Holly Black. So if you're a fan, I'd say check it out. I enjoyed it, and I'm giving it 4 stars. All right, coming in at number 3, we're on our top 3 now, is Confessions by Kanae Minato. This was the May pick for the Literally Dead book club hosted by Kayla at Books and Lala. This one was very short, which you don't often have a thriller that's this short because you usually need like a bit more time to like build the story. This book was wild. This is another one that I go more in depth on in that Book-Oplathon vlog. Check that out if you want to know like my full thoughts on it. This is basically about a teacher who on her last day of teaching reveals that 2 of her students are responsible for murdering her daughter. And then the rest of the book is what happens after that. This is essentially a revenge story, but it's like a revenge story where like everything like weaves back on itself, so you were constantly guessing about what was going to happen. It was wild. It was wild, and I really enjoyed it. This is a book that once you start reading, you do not want to put down. You basically just want to go through the whole book. So while I did take a break to like go to sleep, I got through this entire book in a matter of a few hours because I just couldn't stop reading. I just wanted to know what was going to happen. Very, very good. And the type of thriller that I really enjoy, one that constantly keeps you on your toes, constantly keeps you guessing, wondering what's going to happen. This was a good one. I would highly recommend it. I'm giving it 4 stars. Coming in at number 2 is The Hawthorne Legacy by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. This is the second book in the Inheritance Games trilogy, and I know that this one was not as well liked as the first book in the series because people didn't like that this one was more romance based, but y'all, I felt like that went in perfectly with Avery's story because in the first book she is really trying to figure out like what she's doing, like how does she fit in to this scheme of Tobias Hawthorne. Why is she here? She's got the 2 brothers that she's like drawn to, Grayson and Jameson. She's trying to just figure out where she fits in. And in this book, I felt like she really comes to terms and figures things out for herself. So the romance made sense to me because it's all tied into her figuring out what she wants. So I didn't mind the romance personally. I felt like it worked for the story. This one is not as like game focused as the first one, but there are still some things that they have to figure out, some things they have to work through. There were, again, some twists and turns, some things that you didn't see coming because the story's leading you in one direction and then bam, something else happens. So I thoroughly enjoyed this and I'm so much looking forward to the 3rd book, which comes out in August. Yeah, I really enjoyed this. I love this series. Could not recommend it highly enough. I'm giving it 4 stars and yeah, very, very excited to see how this is all going to end. All right, and coming in at number 1 for May is Gallant by VE Schwab. This is an author that I am slowly reading through her backlist. So last year I read The Archived and I read The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. A couple years ago I read The Darkest Shade of Magic, or Darkest, what is it? A Darker Shade of Magic. It's down on my floor down there. I've really enjoyed everything I've read by her. I didn't love The Archived as much as the other 2, so I expected to thoroughly enjoy this one going into it, and I very much did. This was such a unique story. So it's framed and it looks like it would be middle grade because it has like these illustrations in it. There is a section in the middle where it is like her mother's journal, like taking you through her mother's journal. So it looks like it would be middle grade. However, I feel like the content of this is much more YA. I talk about it again in that Bookathon vlog. Sorry for like repeating myself, but I do go more in depth on this one in that vlog. I just really love the atmosphere of this. I loved the main character. I felt like it was gripping and like gritty and dark without being over the top. But there is some dark content in here, which is why I say it's probably more YA. And I just really, really loved this one. This was another one that like once I got into it, I just wanted to read all the way through to see how it was going to work out. It was a very unique story. I'll read you the back. It says, everything casts a shadow, even the world we live in. And I feel like that essentially sums this book up. But very much enjoyed this. Could not recommend it highly enough. I know a lot of people have already talked this book to death, but I loved it. This is my favorite book of the month. 4 stars right now, but nonetheless, I loved this book. Would highly recommend you check it out if for some reason you have not already done so. And there you have it. Those are the 10 books that I read in the month of May. Really the only dud in the group was Eon. That was the only one that I truly did not like. So I consider that a very good reading month, especially considering that I doubled my total from April. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave me a thumbs up. Consider subscribing to my channel if you would like to see more from me, and I will see you in my next video. Bye, everyone.